Clare Washington dropped the hammer. Her heart pounded wildly. From the rotting wood of the sealed room, a diary fell, and inside was a photograph of Emma taken just yesterday. But this photo was tucked inside a notebook from 1892 with smudged ink that read, "She looks just like her mother." Clare thought she'd only bid on an abandoned hotel for $1 a fresh start after divorce and destitution. But now, that mysterious room whispered a different truth. The unjust death of a black family over a century ago, and an undeniable bloodline connection. Had they truly come home? Or were Clare and Emma the ones summoned back? The hammer slipped from her hand. Its dry thud echoed off the rotting floorboards like a funeral drum. Clare Washington stood frozen, her breath caught, her eyes locked on the object revealed beneath the dust. A dark leather diary, so ancient it seemed it might crumble at a touch. But it wasn't the diary that chilled her blood. It was the photograph tucked in its cover, a picture of Emma, her daughter, clearly taken yesterday, yet nestled in a journal over a century old. The faded inscription behind the photo sent shivers down Clare's spine. "She looks just like her mother." Before that ghostly drumbeat sounded, Clare thought she knew loss. Just 3 months ago, a cold courtroom ended her 17-year marriage. David, her ex-husband, walked away with the white-fenced 2-story house, the gleaming BMW, even the savings account Clare had poured half her salary into for years. His lawyer twisted words like a knife. Clare, trusting, exhausted, signed. Only in the cramped studio apartment, with the washing machine's hum vibrating through the floor each night, did she realize what she'd lost. All that remained was Emma, her 15-year-old daughter, with bright, sharp eyes already tinged with bitterness, and an aging Honda Civic that occasionally roared in protest on the highway. The checking account balance was $17.32, a number just enough to make her laugh through tears. Clare had once been known as a strong woman. In her 20s, she was a star at the media firm where she worked, sometimes leading presentations with unshakable confidence. But when Emma was born, David said, "You should stay home. I'll take care of things." Clare listened. She believed sacrificing her career to raise her child was right. Now those sacrifices had turned to ash. The man she trusted had walked out of her life, taking the world she'd built with him. The day Clare first saw the listing for the Grandview Hotel, it was raining. She sat in their rented room above Romano's dry cleaners. The fluorescent light flickered. Emma sprawled on the sofa, typing homework on an old laptop. The auction website was shoddy, filled with foreclosed properties, rotting warehouses, or overgrown vacant lots. Clare scrolled for hours. Each click weighed heavier on her heart. Then the image appeared, a faded black and white photo of the Grandview Hotel. A 3-story Victorian building. Its domed roof and pointed turrets reached like fingers into gray clouds. Boarded windows, a sagging porch, yet it still exuded a misplaced grandeur. Below, a brief description. Grandview Hotel, Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Built 1892. 24 rooms. Requires full renovation. Starting bid, $1. No reserve price. Buyer assumes liability for any supernatural occurrences. Clare froze. $1. The cramped apartment, where the smell of dry cleaning chemicals clung to Emma's clothes and hair each night, cost hundreds more. A thought flickered. What if this is a chance? Emma glanced at the screen from behind her mother. She let out a half-mocking, half-exhausted laugh. "Seriously, Mom? A haunted hotel? In horror movies, people die in the first scene." Clare stayed silent. Emma didn't understand, or chose not to, that in their situation, any chance was worth taking. Sometimes desperation makes you cling to what others would dismiss outright. For the next 2 days, Clare couldn't stop thinking about the hotel. She looked up Millbrook on Google Street View, a small town with shuttered storefronts and a dwindling population. Wikipedia offered only a few sparse paragraphs, but it was the emptiness that drew her. In that silence, she imagined possibilities. A fresh start, a new home, maybe even a small business. Fresh baked pastries in the morning, travelers passing through, laughter echoing on the stairs. A fragile dream, but a dream nonetheless. On the third night, Clare placed her bid, $1. Her fingers trembled as she clicked. It felt like signing her own sentence. The screen flashed. Highest bidder, Clare, Washington. Time remaining, 2 days, 14 hours, 32 minutes. Emma shot her a look, half fear, half defiance. But in her eyes, Clare saw something else, something long absent. Hope. Over the next 2 days, Clare checked the auction site countless times. No one else bid. It was as if the world cared nothing for Grandview except her. Then the phone rang. A man's gravelly voice came through. Miss Washington, this is Jim Kellerman, Millbrook Realty. I'm calling to ensure you understand what you're bidding on. The place has no heat, no water, the wiring's shot, and, he hesitated, it has a reputation. People say the original owners never left. Clare glanced at Emma. The girl pretended not to listen, but her eyes stayed fixed. In that moment, Clare knew there was no turning back. The apartment lease had 2 weeks left. The bank account was empty. The past had abandoned them. The Grandview Hotel might be her biggest mistake. But it could also be the beginning they needed. And as she clicked the final confirmation, Clare whispered to herself, "We'll survive, at all costs." Dear audience, pause a moment to subscribe to the channel before diving into the main story. But only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. Leave a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's fascinating to see people from all over joining us. A gray sky hung like a shroud as the Honda Civic left Philadelphia. The engine growled in protest. Black smoke puffed from the old exhaust, but Clare gripped the wheel steady. In the passenger seat, Emma propped her chin on her hand, earbuds in, but her eyes wide, watching the scenery slip by. The city faded. Concrete gave way to barren fields, then thin forests in late autumn. Clare had driven 4 hours, but her mind was wearier than her body. Each mile pulled her further from her old life and closer to something no one could call home. She glanced at Emma now and then. The girl said little. The silence of 15, stubborn, wounded, was heavier than any argument. Clare knew Emma hadn't forgiven her for that reckless bid. A highway sign appeared. Its white letters faded. Millbrook, 12 miles. Clare swallowed hard. Her hands tightened on the wheel. Her heart thumped with both excitement and dread, like stepping over an invisible threshold. Millbrook emerged as the sun dipped. Late daylight cast pale orange streaks across Main Street. The main drag was just 4 blocks, still as an old photograph. Many shops were boarded up, signs faded. A barber shop, a grocery, an old bank, now just a dark window. The few surviving businesses looked weary but defiant. A diner with a handwritten sign, Dot's Kitchen. A scratched-up hardware store. A gas station doubling as a post office. The car rolled slowly through town. Clare felt every eye on them. Locals stood outside shops, coffee cups in hand, watching as if strangers had invaded forgotten territory. Clare recalled Kellerman's words. People say the Grand family never left. Then she saw it. At the end of Main Street, the Grandview Hotel loomed, tall and silent like a specter guarding the town. Its Victorian architecture was grand but faded. The porch sagged. The round tower stood bare with dark windows like closed eyes. The main door, once red, now looked like dried blood. Boards nailed over the upper windows resembled forced shut eyelids, guarding a dream no one dared wake. Clare parked at the curb. Her heart skipped, caught between fear and awe. She stepped out. Her shoes crunched on cracked pavement. The wind blew, carrying the musty smell of old wood, and Clare was certain a faint, sweet, sharp scent, like opium syrup from old medical books. No way! Absolutely not. Emma stepped out, arms crossed, eyes wide at the massive structure. Mom, I'd rather sleep in the car. Clare took a deep breath. She'd pictured it 1,000 times. A new home, a project to rebuild, a legacy for Emma. But standing before the heavy red oak door, that vision felt more like a cracked dream than hope. Kellerman, the realtor, was waiting. His office sat above Franklin Kowalski's hardware store. Now he appeared with a file and 2 sets of keys. His weathered face, lined like dry wood, held eyes half pitying, half warning. It's been locked a long time, he said. The keys jingled in his hand. But it'll open easily. Too easily. When the lock turned, the click echoed, unnervingly crisp. Clare shivered. The wooden door swung open. Hinges groaned like an old man's moan. Inside, darkness swallowed the light, revealing only swirling dust motes. Claire crossed the threshold. Her heart pounded like a drum. The air was thick with mildew, but there was another scent, faint, familiar, almost like her mother's old perfume, a classic black fragrance from the 70s. She choked, her feet rooted to the dusty rug. The hotel lobby unfolded before her. High ceilings with cracked plaster, a dim chandelier, a dust-covered mahogany reception desk that still hinted at grandeur. Claire could almost hear echoes of footsteps, laughter mingling with the breeze. An image flashed. Elegantly dressed guests, jazz and gospel blending in this room in 1892. Emma hesitated, then stepped inside. Light from the door illuminated her face, half fear, half curiosity. Claire knew one small step had committed them to a path with no return. Claire's fingers trembled as they brushed the wooden desk, leaving a clean streak in the thick dust. She closed her eyes briefly. In the darkness, she thought she heard a distant song, a gentle, soulful melody, like a lullaby from a southern black church. Swing low, sweet chariot. Claire's eyes snapped open. The room was silent, only the wind whistling through cracks. But Emma stared at her, eyes wide. "Did you hear that, Mom?" Claire didn't answer. She only breathed deeply, looking up the curved staircase to the upper floors, where closed doors waited. In that silence, she realized the decision was made. They had crossed a line. Dear beloved audience, if you're watching and find this story gripping, comment 1. Or I'm still here to keep listening. The Grandview Hotel breathed like an ancient creature. Each step Claire took on the creaking wooden stairs groaned. Dim light from boarded windows barely traced wrinkled golden streaks on the walls. Emma followed, her shoulders tensed, her eyes scanning the hallway, as if any door might swing open to reveal a white-gowned specter waiting. The third-floor hallway stretched long, cloaked in heavy shadow. On either side, wooden doors stood shut, numbered with tarnished brass plates. Claire counted silently. 1 ampere, 1B, 1C, then 2 amperes, 2B. The sequence continued evenly until her eyes hit a gap. After 5B, the next plate wasn't 6 amperes, but 7 amperes. Claire stopped, her brow furrowed. She backtracked, checking again. The numbers aligned perfectly, except for that inexplicable skip. No 6 amperes existed. Only a stretch of wall covered in faded rose-patterned wallpaper. Its surface slightly warped, as if hiding something beneath. A chill ran down her spine. The air here felt denser, heavy like smoke. Claire touched the wall lightly. Her fingers sensed a slight give, as if behind it lay not solid brick, but a hollow darkness. Emma stepped closer, her eyes wide, her arms wrapped around herself. No words were needed, her fear radiated clearly. Claire stepped back, not pushing, but a silent resolve formed within her. This room was the key to everything. The next day, as Claire pried boards from a downstairs window, a figure appeared at the entrance. A tall black man, about 60, hands calloused from labor, his coat dusted with sawdust. His face was stern, but his eyes held something between skepticism and pity. He introduced himself as Franklin Kowalski, owner of the hardware store downtown. He brought gloves, a crowbar, and a warning. Franklin spoke of Grandview not as a businessman, but as a preacher discussing a cursed place. He recalled 1892, when Harrison Grand, a learned black entrepreneur, opened this hotel. It was once the pride of the local black community, a luxurious haven where black families could stay, dine, and gather without discrimination. In an era of rampant racism, Grandview was a living declaration of their right to beauty and dignity. But that pride didn't last. One autumn morning, the entire Grand family was found dead in room 6 amperes. Harrison hanged, his wife, Margaret, and their 7-year-old daughter, Anna, lay lifeless on the bed, their breaths long gone. The official report stated he killed his wife and child, then himself, due to financial ruin. The story spread, tarnishing their honor, turning the hotel from a symbol to a haunt. Franklin stressed that the townsfolk never agreed on the cause. Some believed it was despair. Others swore they heard screams the night before. Repair workers reported eerie occurrences, missing tools, piano music when no one was in the room. shadowy figures in the halls. Finally, to resolve the issue, later owners built a wall, sealing off room 6 amperes entirely. The rose-patterned wallpaper Claire touched was the final veil hiding that room. As Franklin spoke, Claire watched him silently. Each word carried a weight beyond memory, a generational pain. A hotel once the pride of a black community, now choked by rumors and tragedy. And now, it was in her hands a black woman who'd lost everything, clawing at this broken place to rise again. Claire felt her heart pound. There was an invisible thread between her and Grandview. Not just business, but blood, honor, and buried memory. That night, mother and daughter slept in the least moldy room they could find. Outside, wind hissed through cracks, rattling the swaying lamp. Claire lay awake, eyes open, listening to the hotel come alive in the dark. She distinguished the creak of wood, the gurgle of old pipes, and another sound, slow footsteps from the floor above, stopping exactly where the hallway held that strange gap. Emma lay beside her, tense, eyes wide. Neither spoke. They only listened in silence, like helpless witnesses to a trial held over a century ago. Claire knew they couldn't avoid it forever. This hotel wasn't just a building, it was an invitation, or perhaps a challenge, and that hidden room 6 amperes was the door to the truth. In her heart, fear mingled with something else, a burning resolve. If Grandview was a buried symbol, she would unearth it, light it anew. Not just for herself, but for the whispers in the night, the souls waiting to be heard. Faint morning lights slipped through boarded windows, casting thin stripes across the 3rd floor hallway. Claire stood there, gripping the sledgehammer Franklin had given her. Rubber gloves clung to her trembling hands, but her chest burned with thick determination, as if her whole life had led to this moment. Before her, the rose-patterned wall stood silent, swollen, out of place in the aged corridor. It wasn't like the others, soft, almost breathing, hiding a cold void within. Emma stood behind, eyes wary, clutching herself in the shadows. No words passed, only the faint howl of wind through distant windows, like a somber choir urging the act to come. The first blow echoed like a gunshot. The hammer struck, the wall cracked, exposing chipped plaster. Dust flew, golden light pierced through, turning into a floating haze of particles. Claire inhaled deeply. A musty, ancient smell filled her lungs, and instantly, a strange, sweet, syrupy scent spread. It was like medicinal syrup, cloying yet sharp, burning her throat. Emma stepped back, but Claire didn't stop. The second blow, then the third. The wall crumbled, revealing darkness within. A heavy void rushed out, thick as air trapped for centuries. The hallway sank into an ancient breath, stirring a sense of opening a box buried deep in the earth. The flashlight beam swept across, and room 6 amperes took shape. Unlike the other rooms, wrecked, dusty, ceilings stained. This one was pristine, frozen in a moment from 1892 that never moved forward. An intricately carved wooden bed, draped in faded lace. A dressing table by the lone window, its oval mirror reflecting distorted light, warping images like ripples. 2 small chairs sat side by side, waiting for guests who'd never return. Everything was dust-covered but eerily intact, like a silent exhibit. Claire stepped inside, each step heavy, as if descending into a tomb. The red carpet, now faded, sank softly, muffling sound, drowning the room in thick silence. She felt like an intruder in a place not meant for the living. In the flashlight's glow, the oval mirror seemed to shift. Claire saw her reflection twist. Behind it, a glimpse of dark curly hair, an old white dress, a flash, then gone. But the mirror held faint writing, like chalk or soap, etched over a century ago. Protect the child. The air in Claire's lungs froze. She turned away, but couldn't stop her heart hammering like a drum. On the bed, tucked into the carved frame, was a yellowed envelope. The paper was brittle. Claire handled it like a sacred relic. Brown, trembling ink sprawled across. Dearest Margaret, if you read this, my greatest fear has come true. Elizabeth has discovered what we hid. I fear she won't stop. Don't let the child bear our sins. The truth lies within the walls. Signed, Harrison Grand. Claire's hands shook as she folded the letter. The walls, the room, all whispered. She felt the building wanted her to read, to uncover. Emma, silent behind her, aimed the flashlight under the bed. The beam caught crude carvings on the floor. The child is innocent. Elizabeth knows. Find the truth in the walls. No words were needed. They understood. This wasn't just room 6 amperes. It was a vault, holding time captive for a witness to come a century later. As Claire looked back, the mirror shifted again. The reflection cleared. A black man with kind eyes, a woman in a white dress holding a young girl. 3 faces stared at her, not with blame, but with expectation. A cold gust swept through. The flashlight flickered. Behind them, the broken wall sealed itself in thick darkness, swallowing the way out. Claire knew, stepping into 6 amperes, she'd agreed to a pact. Not to flee, but to unearth buried memory. She breathed deeply, clutching the trembling envelope. The truth lay in the walls, and now she and Emma were part of that game. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm both frantic and entrancing. From dawn until darkness swallowed the halls, Claire and Emma knelt, peeling wallpaper, prying old boards. The work was tedious, repetitive, but beneath the dust, the hotel began to speak, like a witness longing to tell its tale. An old worn putty knife became the key to the past. In room 2C, as Claire peeled cracked paper, a second letter appeared, wedged in broken plaster. The handwriting was shaky but urgent. Harrison wrote of Elizabeth, a powerful woman, the town treasurer who embezzled thousands from city funds. The missing money threatened not just Grandview, but the fragile black community in a time of division. Claire read in silence. Each word burned like fire. Harrison had tried to warn them, but no one listened. Now, a century later, the old walls whispered in his voice. In room 2 Farad's, behind a loose baseboard, Emma found a small leather notebook. Inside was Margaret's diary, Harrison's wife. Her soft, feminine script was steeped in dread. She wrote of Elizabeth's visits, her cold eyes on young Anna. One entry read, "She asked if Anna ever looked at Harrison's ledgers. The girl is only 7. Why would a child be involved in money? But the way she asked made me tremble." Emma touched the page, as if connecting with a girl her age from the past. Claire watched her daughter, seeing silent empathy in her eyes. Though a century apart, Margaret's voice had found a listener. The second day, in room 3C, under a warped floorboard, Claire found a bundle of letters. The paper was so thin, it nearly dissolved. They were Harrison's pleas to town officials, begging them to investigate the fraud. He wrote with faith that justice would come, that truth could save his hotel and family. But any replies, if they existed, were lost to time. In room 1B, Emma found a stranger clue. A brick in the fireplace was slightly off color, as if once removed. Carefully prying it out revealed a rusted metal box. Inside were photos, receipts, and scraps of paper noting sums and dates. Each line matched Harrison's notes, an undeniable, meticulous record. Among them, one photo stood out. Elizabeth stood beside an unknown man, exchanging something with a money bag in hand. Behind them was Grandview's porch. On the back, in trembling ink, H, $200, March 1892. The H was unmistakable. Claire gripped the photo. Goosebumps rose. A web of lies, greed, and violence began here, in these walls. Grandview wasn't just haunted by ghosts, but by an unexposed crime. On the third night, as Claire spread the documents on the lobby's wooden table, the hotel felt different. Lights flickered, but the howling wind turned into a broken melody, like an old song. For a moment, Claire felt something not hostile. The house was shedding its burden, shifting from guardian to ally. Emma sat beside her, eyes bright in candlelight. The initial fear had faded, replaced by burning curiosity. She flipped through letters, arranging them into a timeline. It was like solving a giant puzzle, each piece a cry for help from a century ago. Claire realized she'd changed. From a desperate woman clinging to a cheap hotel, she now carried a greater duty. This wasn't just shelter, it was a mission to unravel the story, to restore justice to those silenced. As the clock struck 12, wind gusted through the halls. The door to room 6 amperes, now open, rattled softly. Claire looked up. Her heart tightened. For a moment, she heard a child's faint laugh from that room. Not frightening, but warm, like Emma's laughter as a toddler. Claire closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Perhaps the Grand family had never found a listener. Now, they had, and she wouldn't turn away. Dear audience, are you still here? Take a moment to relax, maybe sip some water, then dive back into this gripping tale. Comment 1 if you find it intriguing. Don't forget to subscribe. The paper slipped from a wall crack, still musty, its ink blurred but clear. Elizabeth knows, but she didn't act alone. Claire held it like a living testament. A century of silence shattered. She realized the killer of the Grand family wasn't just a desperate woman. Behind Elizabeth was a network, a larger hand that buried the tragedy in oblivion. Morning in Millbrook dawned under a pale gray fog, cold as a burial cloth. Claire and Emma sat at the reception desk. Letters, diaries, and evidence piled high. Their eyes met, heavy with resolve. They'd gone too far to turn back. That day, they continued peeling old paper on the first floor. In the dining room, behind a heavy wooden cabinet, Claire found a small hollow. Inside was a stack of faded papers, Margaret's notes. The handwriting was hasty, as if written in darkness. Trembling lines described the final night. Footsteps in the hall. A strange low voice behind the door. Then, Anna's scream, abruptly silenced. It wasn't just Elizabeth there that night. Margaret mentioned him, a man with power in town, but his name was never written. Claire read slowly, each word cut like a blade through the air. The room fell silent, only the wind whistling through cracks. Emma hugged her shoulders, eyes wide with panic. A secret thicker than blood was rising from the earth. As afternoon fell, Franklin Kowalski stopped by with more tools. He was silent, seeing the papers spread across the table. His face heavy, like someone who'd long expected this. He spoke of Millbrook's past, a small town where power rested with a few wealthy families. When Grandview shone, Harrison Grand threatened that order. A luxurious hotel owned by a black man, a community hub, made many uncomfortable. Franklin lowered his voice. Some here didn't want the truth known, didn't want the bell of justice to ring. Claire listened. Her heart sank like lead. This wasn't just a murder, but a deliberate silence, a complicity. And this hotel, through its walls, forced her to face it. That night, as Emma slept, Claire sat alone in the lobby. The old chandelier flickered dimly, illuminating the letters like a river of words. Wind howled outside, and for a moment, she heard a faint voice, dream or reality unclear. A man's low, sad tone, as if from behind the wall. Don't trust those with seats on the council. Claire held her breath, her blood froze. She looked up. The old key rack behind the desk rattled softly, dropping a small paper. The ink was faded but legible. Evidence in the south fireplace. They ordered it burned. Claire's hands shook. It meant after the Grand family's death, someone tried to erase the truth. Those meant to uphold justice, the town's powerful hid the crime. The next day, Claire and Emma followed the clue to the Grand South room. The massive stone fireplace was dust-covered, filled with thick ash. As Emma dug through, they found a half-burned paper. The text was charred, but fragments remained. Town Development Fund, 1,892, and a list of signatures. Among them, one Claire recognized Hartwell. The name struck like thunder. Elizabeth Hartwell wasn't just stealing for herself. She was part of the town council. Among those who signed, likely took money. When Harrison uncovered it, the town chose silence. A staged death was easier than a truth that could topple power. The hotel's air grew heavy as lead fog. Emma trembled. Claire was silent, her heart raging. She felt the walls like chains, but also eyes, urging, keep going, don't let us be forgotten. On the sixth night, Claire heard the piano again. This time the melody was clear, a familiar church lullaby, heavy with pain but steadfast in faith. Claire stood still in the lobby, the music echoing through the halls, sinking into her heart. She knew it wasn't a scare, but a reminder. The souls here wanted the truth spoken. She looked through the cloudy glass door, seeing a shadow on the porch. A tall, thin figure in a fedora, motionless. When Claire stepped out, the porch was empty. only wind swirling dust. But under the steps, a yellowed envelope. Inside, a land deed copy, stamped 1,893. Buyer, Elizabeth Hartwell. Price, a fraction of its value. The date matched weeks after the Grand family's death. Claire clutched the paper. Her heart tightened. Not just murder, but theft. This hotel was never truly bought. It was stolen in blood. In the night, as she returned to the room, Emma stirred, sitting up, eyes distant. Her voice whispered, "Mom, they're not done. They're still here." Claire shivered. Emma had never sleepwalked, but now she spoke in a voice not her own. Claire hugged her, but knew the journey wasn't over. They'd touched the roots, and Millbrook's darkness wouldn't let them go easily. The following days, Grandview was no longer just an abandoned building. It became a resonating box. Every gust, crack, and faint sound echoed buried secrets. Claire could barely distinguish day from night. Both mother and daughter lived amid dust, letters, and past whispers. Emma learned to hear the silence. Claire learned to read the wall's cracks. On the 8th morning, as the sun struggled through fog, a knock came from the porch. Not wind, not the usual ghostly echo, but a clear rhythm. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Claire opened the door. Before her stood an elderly black woman, wrapped in a dark sweater, leaning on a cane. Her eyes were bright but heavy, as if carrying more than a lifetime could hold. "Eleanor Hartwell," she introduced herself. The name sent a chill through Claire. Hartwell, the name haunting every letter, every record she'd found. Eleanor stepped into the lobby. Her eyes scanned the letters and papers on the table. She nodded slightly, as if the evidence only confirmed what she'd long known. "You've dug deep," her voice rasped. "You've let Grandview speak again." Claire stayed silent. Emma stood behind, pressed against the desk, staring at the stranger. Eleanor sat on a wooden chair, a cane at her side, and began to speak. She was Elizabeth Hartwell's great-granddaughter, the woman who left a shadow on this town. But the Hartwell family never took pride in that name. They lived in shame, in rumors everyone knew but none dared voice. She said Elizabeth didn't act alone. She was a tool, but also a beneficiary. Behind her were councilmen, those who used power to hide the embezzlement and made Harrison Grand a scapegoat. Claire listened. Her heart surged and tightened. Each of Eleanor's words fit the clues she'd found, like shards of a broken mirror. Eleanor sighed. "Don't you see, Claire? The hotel called you here not just to uncover, but to remind you of your blood." The words shook the room. Claire was stunned, but Emma felt the lightning strike her. Eleanor reached into her coat, pulling out a faded photo. In it, a young black girl with curly hair stood on the hotel porch, eyes bright and wide. Behind her were Harrison and Margaret. The photo was from 1891. The girl was Anna Grand. Eleanor turned it over, revealing the back. "Anna Grand, our child. May her blood live on." Claire gripped her hands, looking at Emma. The girl stood still. Her lips trembled, her eyes shining. Eleanor continued, slow as laying heavy stones. "Emma, she has Anna's eyes. You are descendants. The Grand blood runs in your line." The hotel fell silent. Only the breathing of 3 women, past, present, and future. Claire felt every burden of the past months gain meaning. Her $1 bid, her plunge into this place, wasn't chance. It was a call. Eleanor said that for generations, the Hartwells kept silent, unable to face it. But when she saw the hotel open its doors to Claire and Emma, she knew the time had come. The truth couldn't stay buried. The Grand blood returned. So must justice. As Claire set the photo on the table, the papers, diaries, and evidence around it aligned like an indictment. Light through the dirty glass lit the burned scrap. Town Development Fund. All pieces formed one picture. Harrison framed for daring to touch power. Margaret and Anna killed to silence them. Elizabeth a tool to hide it. Emma quietly touched Anna's photo. For a moment, Claire saw their faces merge. The child of the past and her daughter, now, blended into an undeniable truth. The hotel seemed to know. The walls stopped groaning, the air lightened. A soft breeze passed, and for a moment, the distant song rose clear, warm. The old gospel hymn, Swing low, sweet chariot. The voices blended into a choir, no longer mournful, but freed. Claire closed her eyes. Tears fell down her cheeks. This was no longer a prison of memory, but a place of its revival. Eleanor stood, slow but steady. Now the work is yours. I've lived my life to see this moment. Grandview will no longer be a grave. It will be a testament. Claire nodded. In that moment, she knew. This hotel would not stay abandoned. It would be restored not just as a building, but as a monument. As the sun sank behind distant mountains, red light pierced the cloudy windows. The lobby glowed like an altar. 3 women, Eleanor, Clare, Emma, stood in that light, like 3 generations bound by blood, sin, and redemption. Outside, night fell. But in Grandview's heart, for the first time in over a century, there was true light. At dawn, Millbrook's Grandview Hotel looked different. The windows were still broken, the paint still peeled, but something intangible had shifted. It was no longer a house of death trapped by the past. It became a place of memory and testimony. Claire stepped onto the porch, breathing the cold morning air. Inside, Emma carefully stored Anna's photo and the old letters in a wooden box, like placing a new heart in the hotel. Eleanor, her aged eyes gleaming with peace she'd never known, whispered a prayer. Last night's piano was silent, but its echo lingered in the air. Soft, solemn, like a farewell. The Grand family finally had justice. And for Claire, it was justice for herself, a woman who'd lost everything, now finding home in ruin. Beyond, the town remained faded. But Claire knew, as Grandview revived, Millbrook would change. The hotel wasn't just a structure, it was a symbol, that truth could sleep a century, but never die. Before closing the door, Claire wrote in the guest book on the reception desk, "Welcome to Grandview. This is more than a hotel. It's where truth is kept, where stories never end." The wind swept the porch, carrying a faint echo, children's laughter, and a distant song. Claire smiled. Not a warning, but a greeting. Grandview had awakened, and for the first time in over a century, it was truly a home.